Hi guys, it's Miss Smoot. You are starting out the Odyssey. I know you've already kind of done the invocation, but this is like really getting into the meat of the story. And it literally is because the story starts in medias res, meaning in the middle. You know that from our background notes. I'm going to explain a little bit about that to you, and I'm going to talk about Calypso, and then I'll read it to you guys. You need the handout to follow along with me. Here we go. Let me show you something that's important real quick. Hold on. There we go. All right, so this is our timeline of the Odyssey and then what happens. So yes, you've read the invocation. Excellent. We actually start reading Calypso right here. And he spent 7 years on Calypso's island. You'll find out why in a second. But this is where we start reading because this is where we first see Odysseus. Then on his next island, which you'll see when you read it, he winds up washing ashore, and they're like, hey, who are you? What's going on? And so they ask him questions. And that's when Odysseus recounts everything that already happened to him. Right here, you can kind of see my mouse circling it. All of this we get to hear from King Alcinous's court. So that's how we get all that background information. So it's going to feel weird, like in your packet, as far as like going back and forth and stuff, but it'll be fine. I try and clue you in on this as much as possible. But just know we're starting here already so far into Odysseus's journey. Yeah. Okay, so done with that. Okay, so next, talking about Calypso. I have this excerpt and I have another excerpt that we read as well because I think they're very important parts of our story. They definitely reveal a lot about Odysseus. However, they are not included in our textbook for a pretty obvious reason. Odysseus is married to his lovely wife, the ever faithful Penelope, that's her epithet, but he's not that faithful himself. And it really shouldn't be, but I know I feel weird talking to you guys about that kind of stuff like outright. And like, I don't really want videos of myself on the internet talking about that stuff outright. So the phrase that I use every single year when I talk about when two people do something together like that, like Odysseus does, not with his wife, I call it checkers. I call it checkers because it's two people doing something, playing it together. Anyone can play checkers. Checkers. So in this video and in a few other videos, I'll refer to it as checkers. Just know that's what I'm talking about. I know it's weird. I know it's silly, but I think that way makes it a little less awkward to discuss. So I'm assuming we can all be grown-ups about this. I think it'll be fine. It's not going to like affect the whole story. Don't worry. This isn't turning into some weird thing, but it's just good to know for this story and a few others. Ready? Here we go. So I'm on my handout. Have yours pulled up or printed out. It's probably better to print it out so you can take notes as we go because like mine is chock full of notes. But you know, you do you. I'm the one who made the test and I'm the one who took notes on mine. So you decide what's best for you. So it kind of gives us a little overview at the top. Books 1 through 4 of the epic tell about Odysseus' son Telemachus. Telemachus has been searching the Mediterranean world for his father, who has never returned from the 10-year Trojan War. When we first meet Odysseus in book 5 of the epic, he is a prisoner of the beautiful goddess Calypso. The old soldier is in despair. He has spent 10 years, 7 of them, as Calypso's not entirely unwilling captive, trying to get home. The goddess Athena has supported and helped Odysseus on his long journey. Now she begs her father, Zeus, to help her favorite mortal, and Zeus agrees. He sends the messenger god Hermes to Calypso's island to order Odysseus released. Although Calypso is not described as evil, her seductive charms, even promises of immortality for Odysseus, threaten to keep the hero away from his wife, Penelope. So, pulling that back up. Sorry, I should have lifted it up. I kind of wanted to have my face big for that conversation. Boop, boop. There we go. So, 7 years is how long he spent on Calypso's island. Athena favors Odysseus, not in like a weird way, not like a checkers way, but in kind of like a way of how people are like, oh, this is so precious, like with a puppy or something. It's kind of like that. The gods and goddesses definitely got bored, so they kind of watched what the humans are doing, like how we watch reality TV, like The Bachelors or Kardashians or whatever. We're just like, interesting. And then we go away and like focus on other stuff, and we come back, we're like, oh, they're struggling, that's so sad, or whatever. So that's kind of how I like to think of how the gods thought of this and how Athena thinks of Odysseus. She's just like, oh, he's so precious, Dad, we have to help him. So it's important to remember this chain of command. Athena asks Zeus to send Hermes to tell Calypso to let Odysseus go. That's the chain of command for how they get Odysseus released. So now we actually go to the actual text and we open with Hermes. No words were lost on Hermes the Wayfinder, that's his epithet, who bent to tie his beautiful sandals on, ambrosian, oh golden, that carry him over water or over endless land in a swish of the wind, and took the wand with which he charms asleep, or when he wills, awake the eyes of man. So wand in hand, he paced into the air and shot from Pieria down to sea level and veered to skim the swell. So that's just describing how he got ready to go. He grabbed his wand, he grabbed his magic shoes that help him fly, and he went down to go talk to Calypso. A gull, this is important, a gull patrolling between the wave crests of the desolate sea will dip to catch a fish and douse his wings. No higher above the whitecaps Hermes flew until the distant island lay ahead. That is our very first epic simile we're approaching. So remember, epic similes are very extreme comparisons, and they're really long. They may not always use like or as. So we've got, from our story, we know it's comparing how Hermes is flying. I'm pulling that from here. It says, no higher above the whitecaps Hermes flew. And that's being compared to a gull or a seagull who's going over the waves, looking for fish to catch. Now, let's be honest. If you're a gull and you're trying to eat something, you're not going to be flying so far above the sea, you couldn't see fish. So they have to fly nice and low so they can keep an eye out for the fish and then grab them when they can. That's how low Hermes is flying, so close to the water that basically he could catch a fish if he wanted to, like a gull. No higher but the whitecaps Hermes flew. Perfect. I boxed it on mine. You might want to box that on yours for being the epic simile and like write down what's being compared. Until the distant island lay ahead. Then, rising shoreward from the violet ocean, he stepped up to the cave. Divine Calypso, one of her epithets. The mistress of the isle was now at home. Upon her hearthstone, which is just a fireplace, a great fire blazing scented the farthest shores with cedar smoke and smoke of thyme, and singing high and low in her sweet voice before her loom a-weaving, she passed her golden shuttle to and fro. A deep wood grew outside with summer leaves of alder and black poplar, pungent cypress. Ornate birds here rested their stretched wings, horned owls, falcons, cormorants, long-tongued beach-combing birds, and followers of the sea. Around the smooth-walled cave, a crooking vine held purple clusters under pile of green, and 4 springs, bubbling up near one another, shallow and clear, took channels here and there through beds of violets and tender parsley. All of that's describing Calypso's island. And if you had to summarize it in one word, what would you call it? Beautiful? Gorgeous? Paradise? Like, this place is beautiful. This is amazing. It's got everything you could ever want. It's got all these birds and flowers and beautiful bubbling streams and stuff. So much so that even Hermes, a god, is impressed. Here we go. Even a god who found this place would gaze and feel his heart beat with delight. So Hermes did. But then when he had gazed his fill, he entered the wide cave. So even Hermes is like, wow, Calypso, nice place around here. All right. Now, face to face, the magical Calypso recognized him, as all immortal gods know one another on sight, the seeming strangers far from home, which is pretty cool that you could be like, Calypso, Hermes, because like they just know each other because they're both magical beings. But he, Hermes, saw nothing of the great Odysseus, who sat apart as 1,000 times before and racked his own heart groaning with eyes wet, scanning the bare horizon of the sea. This is important. This is the first time we're hearing about Odysseus. And he is, eyes wet, scanning the bare horizon of the sea. He's crying. And honestly, for us, that's definitely not a big deal, but definitely in the more of the toxic masculinity setting of the Greeks, he wouldn't be crying normally. So people probably, he's crying. He's supposed to be a great, strong leader, and he's crying. So that would be unusual for them. Hermes tells Calypso she must give up Odysseus forever, and now is when we are directly introduced to him. The strong god glittering left her as he spoke, and now her ladyship, having given heed to Zeus's mandate, went to find Odysseus in his stone seat to seaward, tear on tear, brimming his eyes. So he's like looking out on the ocean like, oh, just crying, so upset. The sweet days of his lifetime were running out in anguish over his exile, for long ago the nymph had ceased to please. Checkers. Though he fought shy of her and her desire, he lay with her each night, for she compelled him. Checkers. But when the day came, he sat on the rocky shore and broke his own heart, groaning with eyes wet, scanning the bare horizon of the sea. So basically, every day he would sit on the shore and be like, oh my gosh, my wife, my home, my son, he's so grown up now and I'm not seeing him. Oh, I miss them so much. But every night he would go play checkers with Calypso for every day for 7 years. So what do you guys think about that? Do you think that makes him a cheater or not? I'm just curious. So, yeah. Doo-doo-doop. Back to my text. Now she stood near him in her beauty, saying, "O forlorn man, be still. Here you need grieve no more. You need not feel your life consumed here. I have pondered it, and I shall help you go." Which, here's the thing, Calypso. You haven't pondered and decided. You were told by Hermes that you had to let him go or Zeus would come down on you. Remember, Zeus is the god of all gods. Like all the gods and goddesses and all the magical beings had to listen to him. So it's not her deciding to help him go. She has to let him go. But she's not telling Odysseus this. Why do you think that is? Does she still want to seem favorable to Odysseus? Does she like want him to think that he owes her one? It could be any of these things. So Calypso promises Odysseus a raft and provisions to help him homeward without harm, provided that the gods wish it. Now Odysseus and Calypso are going to say goodbye. Swiftly she turned and led him to her cave, and they went in, the mortal and immortal. He took the chair left empty now by Hermes, where the divine Calypso placed before him victuals and drink of men. Then she sat down facing Odysseus, while her serving maids brought nectar and ambrosia to her side. Side note, those are the gods' main food and drink source, or ambrosia and nectar, just because they're super fancy and golden colored. Then each one's hands went out on each one's feast until they had had their pleasure. And she said, "Son of Laertes, O versatile Odysseus," both could be his epithets, "after these years with me, you still desire your own home? Even so, I wish it well." So like, this is it. This is her last chance to talk to him about like, what he's going to do, stay or go. So she's like, "You want your old home? Well, if you do, that's fine. I wish you well. I hope it goes really well." Then now's where she starts like trying stuff. "If you could see it all before you go, all the adversity you face at sea, you would stay here and guard this house and be immortal." So 2 things. 1, she's like, if you could see all the terrible things that are going to happen to you, you would stay here. So 1, terrible stuff's going to happen. So maybe she's like, well, if he's not super sure, maybe he'll be like, I guess I'll just stay here. That sounds too hard. And the biggest part is she offers him something, immortality. He could live forever with her on this island, and they could, have this beautiful island, have all this food, and have really whatever they wanted for the rest of their lives, which is forever. But I don't know if he'll take it or not. Then she kind of like, Calypso turns and gets a little bit nastier. "You would stay here and guard this house and be immortal, though you wanted her forever, that bride for whom you pine each day." Who is she talking about? It's Penelope, the same woman that he's been crying over each day. And now she's going to get extra nasty. "Can I be less desirable than she is, less interesting, less beautiful? Can mortals compare with goddesses in grace and form?" So now she's getting a little bit haughty in my mind. Like, she's like, can she really be better than me? Like, am I less desirable than her? Am I less interesting? Am I not as beautiful? Like, can she, immortal, be better than me? Someone who's magical and has the gift of the gods? Like, she's getting real heated about this. To this, the strategist Odysseus answered, "My lady goddess, there is no cause for anger. My quiet Penelope, how well I know, would seem a shade before your majesty, death and old age being unknown to you, while she must die. Yet it is true, each day I long for home, long for the sight of home." So here's what Odysseus is saying. My quiet Penelope would seem a shade before your majesty. He's calling her ugly, his wife, that he has been not very faithful to this whole time while he's been away. So he calls her ugly, a shade before your majesty. Then he says, death and old age being unknown to you, which is basically saying like, yeah, I recognize that she's probably gotten older and she's all wrinkly and stuff. So she got that against her. And then he says, and also I do understand she's going to die. Ick. Like, dude, this is your wife. So what he tells Calypso is, but each day I long for home, long for the sight of home. So he's not saying that he necessarily wants his wife. He's saying he wants to go home. You can unpack that yourself, or if you think that's true, or if that's just him covering himself. I don't know. I'd love to know what you guys think. So Odysseus builds the raft and sets sail, but the sea god Poseidon is by no means ready to allow an easy passage over his watery domain. You'll see why soon. He raises a storm and destroys the raft. It is only with the help of Athena and a sea nymph that Odysseus arrives, broken and battered, on the island of Scheria. There he hides himself in a pile of leaves and falls into a deep sleep. This is the island of King Alcinous, but you'll hear why in a second. Then this very last part, next epic simile. A man in a distant field, no hearth fires near, will hide a fresh brand in his bed of embers to keep a spark alive for the next day. So in the leaves, Odysseus hid himself, while over him Athena showered sleep, that his distresses should soon end, and soon, in quiet sleep she sealed his cherished eyes. So that first chunk of that paragraph is our epic simile. A man in a distant field, no hearth fires near, will hide a fresh brand in his bed of embers to keep a spark alive for the next day. So in the leaves, Odysseus hid himself. So we know it's talking about Odysseus, so we need to know specifically more about what. This man in a distant field. He has no other fires nearby. It's time to go to bed. He's getting tired and his fire is dying. If you've ever been camping or anything, you may not have tried to start a fire like by hand, no matches, no ready sticks, no cotton balls soaked in whatever. But if you've ever tried to do it by yourself, like, it takes forever. Like, imagine sitting there with 2 sticks going, trying to get some fire to go. It takes so long. So this man in this field knows that, and he will hide a fresh brand or a stick in his bed of embers to keep the spark alive for the next day. So if you've ever like watched a fire die, you know that the embers and like the coals and stuff get really red. And they're not necessarily on fire that we can see, but they're really hot. So the man in the field takes his brand or his stick and shoves it deep into the fire. So the next morning, when he gets up, the stick will still be really warm and possibly still red and smoldering. So all he'll have to really do is go, and then boom, he'll have a fire catch a little bit on leaves, and he can build his fire from there. So that's way easier than doing it by hand, like with sticks, and that's it. So he shoves the brand into the fire in hopes that it will keep a spark alive for the next day. That is how Odysseus dives into a pile of leaves to sleep, with hopes that he'll be able to have a spark for the next day. Because he's exhausted, he's been swimming to fight for his life, he's just escaped Calypso. And so here he is. And so he dives into the pile of leaves to try and get some sleep. And so he and his diving into the pile of leaves is compared to how a stick is shoved into fire to keep it hot for the next day. All right, that is it for Calypso from me. I know that it has questions on the sheet that you're probably looking at. I just care about the questions in your packets. So look at the questions in your packet, and that will be what I care about. Thank you guys for listening to this, and you can continue on to your next story. Bye, guys.